Welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Mystery School podcast. This is your podcast for resources for all things spiritual, all different concepts, things to learn about your own sovereignty, your own spiritual path, your power, and so much more. This episode, I'm really excited to share with you because I don't feel like I've shared enough of my own personal experiences with energy and different connections, things that I didn't realize could be deeply helpful to other people. And I'm going to be quite honest, the reason why I haven't shared these parts of myself is because I was worried about judgments I would get or people thinking I was crazy. And I really had to start owning who I was on all levels. I'm someone who loves to do remote viewing. I utilize a tool called Mindscape all the time, and I work with all different levels of energy for my clients, also for myself, though, too. I spend quite a bit of time going over my own energy and doing my own journeys so that I can further assist myself and to let go of things that I no longer need. And I do get help from many different practitioners as well. I have my own healing team as well. And there's just so many people that I can refer you to at the same time, which is fantastic to have such a wonderful team. So, the story that I'm going to share with you today was something that helped me learn a lot deeper about karma, so action consequence, but then also just where people are at in their mindset. Because I am a recovering people pleaser fixer. And this is quite embarrassing, but I mean, it's a lot of different conditionings from when I was growing up. In order to stay safe, I had to keep people happy, certain family members happy, in order to not be met with anger or other different types of emotional abuse, things to that nature. And if you've read any of the chapters in my books that I've put out, you would know a lot more about some of these things that I've gone through. And I'm probably going to put it on my podcast at some point because it's something that can be deeply helpful. So, going back to what I'm sharing today was a journey that I did a couple of years ago. I was in a position where I had been doing some healing for quite some time after a situation that had occurred. It'd been just over a year, and I'd spent that first year really diving deep into my healing, figuring out who I was, where I kind of went wrong in that situation, what I could have done differently. And a lot of what I figured out at the time is that I was putting too much of myself and my needs on the back burner. In order to keep someone else happy, I had to severely limit my healing gifts and who I was in all levels because it just wasn't supported, wasn't accepted. It's like, yeah, I let you do this, but, you know, so it wasn't actual support. Support is when you encourage somebody, it's where you love all those pieces of them. And for the longest time, I didn't have a lot of that in the healing dynamic. So, what I've heard from other people is that, oh, life must be so good. Your decisions must be so easy. Life must be so easy. Childbirth must have been so easy. But what they didn't see behind the scenes is the fact that because of what I chose to do for a living, I lost a lot of my family. They did not support what I did, but I wasn't going to give up my dreams for that reason in order to make them happy. I was done with that. So I was no longer repeating that pattern. And again, there's other supports, or I should say non supports, in my immediate environment for a long time who made fun of what I did, who talked badly about what I did to other people. And I'm just going to say my birth story was just horrific. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I went through depression after that. And there was just so much else that went on behind the scenes, too. So often, when you go into this kind of work, what happens is that anyone that's been trying to keep what they're doing a secret, anyone that does not want the truth to be exposed, or people that just don't believe the same things you do, instead of them actually being supportive and understanding that people can have different beliefs, it's not a right versus wrong type situation. they don't realize that they can just support you regardless. And what will happen is that it will become very confronting for them because they're faced with an opposing belief, and many people will choose that I'm just right and everyone else is wrong, which is a huge dysfunction. And you're still seeing that dysfunction everywhere. So, going back into this journey that I did, it was after I had an amazing, amazing soul retrieval session with Brenda Soulfire. She is an incredibly close connection, and I love her to death. Her website is brendasoulfire.com. And I really wanted to just kind of describe what would happen in that as well. Like, I went on a shamanic journey with her. I found parts of my soul which was relating to my inner child, and that was incredible. But when I did my own journey, probably 6 months later, I would say, I went down deep into the energy vortex, deep into the astral plane. And I call this the first astral plane because this is where a lot of people that haven't like fully passed on, um, where people have also hid parts of their soul, hid parts of who they are. To me, it just seems like a tormented vortex. And a lot of it has to do with pain and suffering. To me, it's essentially what people would describe as hell, just I don't think it's as they describe it. So to me, it's like another step down of our third dimensional reality, but it's the first astral plane. And it's a lot of that old generational conditioning around the pain and suffering that still exists. So when I went down deep into this place here, I decided to just, you know, I wouldn't say have fun, but yeah, that's kind of how I am. I go into weird places. I'm like, okay, how can I make this fun and interesting in a way? Because to me, playing with energy is playing with energy. Yes, I'm serious with it. Yes, I understand how energy is created, transmuted, things like that. But when I went down into this place, I was basically seeing if there was any other part of me that I needed to bring home, if there was parts of my power that I had left in this space. And my intention was if there was anything still kind of like attached to me in any way that I had allowed. And I've had a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot, but I've had a few unhealthy relationships. So I just wanted to make sure that my energy was clear. So as I went down into this place, the person that I had just ended things with, they were in this place. And it's interesting because usually in this place, people will usually hide, you know, but this person had built a whole house in that energy. And the interesting thing was this person looked quite comfortable in this. So how I saw it was they were comfortable in their pain and suffering. And when I saw that house and I saw that person in this energy vortex, I also saw a teenage version of me there. And it was at that moment that I knew that something I had said at 15, 16 had actually attached me to this person on a soul level. I was so hurt at that age, and I was so upset by everything that had been going on. I was probably, yeah, around 16. I was in so much pain because this was a person that I really cared about, and this person continuously chose to hurt me. And I continuously chose at that time to keep taking this person back into my life. I kept letting them bounce around because I was convinced that if I was better, if I was different, that this person would choose me finally. Again, this was back at the age where I was codependent, What I learned was to keep people in a state where they are happy at the expense of me, and I didn't even realize the parts of me that I was literally cutting out of myself to make others happy. And when I saw that version of me, it brought up so much sadness, so much hate about myself, so much self-loathing, so much of me being like, I can fix me so you will love me dynamic. And the more that this part of me subconsciously held on to the other person, and the more that they held on to me, oh, the more stagnant my life became. The harder it was to actually move forward. Less opportunities came my way. I could see how it created just this like hurricane around me of just negativity, things that I was buying into. And of course, these things were all choices. A lot of it at the time was subconscious, but it was at a time where I could really start seeing the patterns and start to make different choices. And this is a lot of what I learned about myself from those ages, and then also adult age me, where I was still doing the same patterns with different people and getting the same results because I kept abandoning myself in hopes that if I did everything that they wanted me to, they would see me, they would choose me, instead of understanding that I just wasn't the one for these people. And it was a codependent and toxic pattern, one that I was adding to. Yeah, they were terrible people. Some were very abusive, like throwing a pot of boiling water at me, throwing me down a set of stairs, or grabbing me and throwing me onto the ground, almost onto a busy roadway. Those kinds of things. And I kept trying to make it work for whatever reason, convinced that I was the problem because I was used to being gaslit my whole life and manipulated by people. So through this experience, it became so clear that this person had chosen to be in this state of suffering. I could see the plethora of choices available to this person that they just weren't choosing. They didn't want to. And they were just happy being unhappy because they still hadn't found who they were. They were still living by other people's expectations and what the societal norm was and what you should be doing at what age and XYZ, fill in the blanks. So people often do that. They choose people to fulfill a role versus what they actually want. So as I watched these two dynamics playing out, I was in this place surrounded by my white light. And all I did was ask that 15, 16-year-old self, hey, are you good here? Like, are we done? Can you come with me? And I could see that version of myself. Sorry, it's still emotional to think back to this. But she was so excited to leave. She thought she was trapped. And when I say she, I mean me. This part of me thought she was just trapped. But I literally had to show her that the door was actually open. It was unlocked. She could leave anytime. And this is something that I have been shown over and over and over in dreams and in certain patterns that we trap ourselves by thinking for whatever reason that we can't leave. But there's always a way, energetically, physically, emotionally, even if it takes time, could take a couple days, it could take 5 years. There are ways to change where you are, to change patterns, to change the position that you're in. But I have a lot of compassion, not just for myself, but for others, because when you're in it, it is almost impossible to see until you're finally able to see it for what it truly is. And usually that takes coming out on the outside, having some deep honesty and reflection. No, this is not something that we chose to bring into our life. It's not something that we attracted. None of that BS that we get told. But often we are stuck because we can't find the solution, or we might not be open to the solution. Even in dreams, when it comes to spirits and entities and them in your life and things like that, there's usually a way that you feel trapped. Like it's no use, it's just going to keep happening. And when we have those beliefs and we act on them, that is more or less of what we're going to get and experience. So when I finally showed her the door was open, she was so happy to leave. And even just seeing what she looked like, oh, it just broke my heart. Because back then I dealt with a lot of physical issues like lethargy and things like that, but I also struggled with eating disorders and things like that. But she looked so thin and depleted. And what I could see was like all the energy from her was going to the other person. So it was a massive energy leak in all ways. But it's not like there was no symbiosis. I had spent many of my years giving myself up to this person, to no longer follow what felt good for me or what I enjoyed. And I didn't even realize that I was doing it because it was so normalized. And it wasn't until, this later adult time of mine that I realized that even though I had already been doing personal development for a couple of years at this time, when things got re engaged, when things happened again, I still wasn't ready to set those boundaries because I wanted a certain outcome. And because I wanted a certain outcome, I was willing to do anything, including give up parts of myself. Now, there was things that I still stuck to, and I was really proud of myself for doing it. Trying to take care of myself physically and going to the gym and, trying to see friends here and there. But there was a lot of other things that I just didn't make the time for anymore. I stopped talking about energy work and things that I really loved. And I thought, well, I don't need someone who is also in that with me. But I do realize that that is actually the most important thing for me. I need someone who understands that. I need someone who supports that. I need someone who I don't need to dim my healing gifts or my light in order to make them comfortable. Again, it's not that everyone has to believe in your belief, but for me, it's really important to be surrounded by people who are supportive of this journey that I am on. It's important that I have someone that I have as a sounding board, that I can talk about my experiences to, and they don't think that I'm crazy, that they don't laugh at me, 10 minutes later to their friends or try to use information against me. So after I was able to get her out of that place, get her out of that astral realm, get her into like a healing cocoon, and then allow that energy back into my system when it was ready, I could just see so much of what was missing in my system. And this is around the time I decided I'm going back to dance, I'm doing all these things, I'm going back to painting. Like there's so many things that I'm reconnecting with, and it was all from that age, things that I just stopped doing because I never made the time for anymore. and just seeing the bright flashes of light as I re engaged with this part of me and welcomed this piece of myself back. It felt freeing, it felt liberating. I was crying so much through this process because it reaffirmed what I already kind of knew. And it was at that point that I understood this person was happy where they were, and there was nothing that I could do because they're just going to keep feeding the same cycles. And it was never going to change. Not that I would have changed the direction I was going in at this point, but it was a good confirmation to understand and to also have compassion that sometimes people go through so much in their life, but that doesn't mean that I have to keep giving them chance after chance because I know what their traumas are, because I understand why they react and act a certain way. And often I would use these as excuses for people because I knew what they went through. And my whole thing was, well, if you just love people and have compassion, if you unconditionally love people, it will give them what they never had and they will see the light. And while that's a good, naive sentiment, I realized that you can have love and compassion for people, but also be out of their line of fire, not feed their cycles, and not keep giving them excuses to be in your life when they're not showing you the level of respect, love, and care that you actually need and deserve. It really helped me to understand that at a certain point, things do become a choice, especially with certain resources that are available to some of these people that I know. And I understand it's hard, courageous work. It's easier to ignore and suppress, but it just helped me to understand the situation in such a deeper way. And I was able to call my power back, parts of me back. I was able to untangle myself. And from there, whew, the opportunities started to come flooding in. My business changed so much. I started winning things that I would never win before. I used to consider myself a very unlucky person. And then I started changing that mindset as well, saying I'm very lucky. And then I just started winning contest after contest after contest, whether it was for business or something self care related. It really didn't matter. And I was finally able to start magnetizing proper friends and support systems at this point, and clients even. Not to say things were perfect after this, because I still had to look at certain patterns, boundaries I was not setting, in ways that I was still somewhat people pleasing. Because it's a never ending cycle or journey. But to go into this deep, deep travel into this place and find a part of me that was still linked up with another person, it wasn't an easy process. But this is why I love the tools that I have, because it allows me to do these sorts of things. It allows me to see things beyond the norm. And I think it's so important, especially with energy, because energy is everything. It's not just what you see, what you feel, what you touch. It's so much more beyond that. Our intuition is a tool that allows us access to information beyond the normal five senses. And then we have our intuitive five senses. So technically, we have 10 senses. I know everyone's like, oh, we have six, we have 12, blah, blah, blah. But our five senses plus the additional subtle parts of those senses. So I say 10. When we're able to do that and go into energy streams and we're able to free that up and unclog things and to clear things off and understand the learning lesson in it, because usually there's something symbiotic there. I'm not saying that we attract our experiences, but I'm saying with patterns, there's things that happens for years. They're consistent behaviors that happen for years. They're not by accident. If we're unaware, we keep repeating. That's why it's the same situation, different people. But once we learn and understand what went wrong when and why we kept continuing, that gives us so much insight. It's not about the first meeting with people. It's about after, when they show you who they truly are, what do you then do? And did you honor yourself throughout the entire connection? If not, that's where you get to learn, not beat yourself up. You say, okay, next time I'm not going to give up my hobbies. Sure, you might need to compromise a little in relationships and friendships, things like that, but you don't give up your core values and things that fundamentally make you you, things that you really love and enjoy. I'm just going to say, if someone wants you to give up something that you really love and enjoy that's not hurting anyone, like a dance class, then you probably should really think about that connection. Is that truly healthy? Hmm. So just sharing these experiences, because I feel like this can give you some insight if you want to do your own journeying. And of course, everything that we do energy wise, always make sure that, I don't want to say that you know what you're doing, because that's not true at all. Because energy is energy. I mean, we all have access to the same information. It's just to be in a neutral space, for one. And yes, you're going to have other emotions come up, but also understand there is no harm. Nothing can actually hurt you for so many different reasons. And I will go over this more in a separate podcast, because energy is energy. If you act on being afraid of energy, you're probably going to experience more weird stuff. I've worked with entities for 12 years. So I feel like for something that's so unknown and weird, I have a pretty good understanding of how they work and why. I just see them as teachers. I see everything as a teaching moment. The moment I stopped believing that other energies had power over me was the time that basically any attachment and weird stuff just stopped happening. But the moment I act on those beliefs that energies have power over me, that is when things get really messed up. So it's a part of the sovereignty that I've talked about in earlier episodes, but also knowing that you're a very powerful creator. And if you want to follow the energy lines to find where your power is, if it's outside of you, if it's no longer within you, if it's attached to something else, if it's been given somewhere else, or if there's an energy leak, just make sure that when you do bring that energy back, that you also fill that energy with love and understanding and compassion. And I always send love back to wherever that connection came out of. Even though I know it's my connection, if I was attached to another person, or if they were sucking that energy, it really doesn't matter how it's happening. I send love back, because I don't want any open ends. I don't want anything remaining loose. And I don't want to sit there and necessarily judge people either. I know there's different situations, a lot of ways in which I might have understood why people did what they did. I also don't feel the need necessarily to have to forgive. Like, I can move on by releasing the pain in other ways. Forgiveness is only just one tool, guys. You can move on without having to use that as a tool, although it is a very powerful tool when it's genuine. And this is why I say you don't have to do it, because if it's not genuine, it is truly not going to bring anything good for you. If you can't genuinely forgive another person, don't do it. It's not going to fix anything. It truly isn't. You have to work on the emotional level, the experience, all of those things. And maybe eventually one day you can get to that space. But I don't agree that you have to with every single person that's ever hurt you. Just understanding the situation. Like, a lot of things that happened when I was a child, I didn't ask for those experiences. And as children, we deserve to be protected. And when those things happened, I could give so much love and compassion to that younger self who had no idea what was going on, to where this person of authority was supposed to be protective and loving, but instead was abusive. So instead of judging me, what I could have done differently as a child was understanding that I was just a child. So not every situation is of your own creation. And that's not to bypass responsibility. It's to get out of the self-hatred. It's to get out of the judgment of self, and then understanding in the future, when now you know certain cues, now you know certain experiences, how would you handle them differently as an adult? And even as adults, sometimes we don't always see it right away. It can take time, and when it does, then we have the opportunity, once we understand what's going on. So I'm just curious if any of you have ever worked with bringing back your power, if you did any journey around that, anything that you'd like to share about what you saw. Just really interesting, because I do feel like as powerful creators, we do have the ability to work with our own energy and to do these things for ourselves. Working with other healers expedite processes, absolutely. And I work with healers too, and I do not discount that by any means, but there's a lot that we can also do for ourselves. There's a lot of tools and resources that we can actually hone in on and utilize appropriately. And I think it's incredible that we have so many things available to us now in this life that we can utilize. And this is why I try to have a lot more compassion as well for the other generations that didn't realize what toxic, unhealthy relationships and friendships and work environments were. There was such a interesting low normal for many places, many people. But a lot of what those in our past have gone through have paved the way for where we are now, with our intuition, with our skill, with just being able for the mass consciousness to be able to journey into their own energetics of their power and to call it back. Like, that's pretty amazing. So I encourage you that if you do tune into your energy, if you do see any cords, anything that does not feel right, just transmute it with the violet flame, transmute it with the white light, fill all areas with love, call things back like a magnet, call your power back like a magnet. Any energy in you that's not of you or from you, send it out. Just literally say, any energy that is not mine in my body, I am no longer holding for others. I will no longer be holding any energy for any other person for any reason. I now send back all this energy with love to who it belongs. Subconsciously, we might store things from other people because we want to help in some capacity. We don't want them to hurt. So, hey, we end up hurting ourselves, right? And I only laugh because I've done it so much in my life and I've worked on it so much that now when I look back, I'm like, oh man, I really wanted people to love and accept me, but I really didn't love and accept myself. And those are the first things that I had to work on. First and foremost was having the support system in place and also knowing that I was deserving and worthy of love. So I'm digressing from the message of this original podcast here. So calling back your power, doing that with love, doing that with compassion, not judging other people, but just understanding. And if you do have anything you'd like to share, you can, drop it in the comments. You can email me at trinitysage333@gmail.com if you wanted to share any experiences that you've had. And also if any of this was helpful for you, anything resonate as you were listening, because often I find when I listen to others in their healing journey, it activates so much within me, and I start doing the work as I'm listening to them. So I'd love to know what your biggest takeaways were, and I'll be back in a couple of weeks with another brand new episode. So stay tuned. And yeah, Enjoy working with your power and calling it back.